Every family has its stories, right? Well, mine has one that's a little different. It's about a room. A room in the old house I grew up in, the room that would not stay empty. It all started when I was about 10. We lived in this rambling two-story house built sometime in the early 1900s. It had all the usual quirks of an old home: creaky floors, drafty windows, and a peculiar layout. There was one room, though, tucked away at the end of the upstairs hallway, that was more than just quirky. It was strange. It was a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with a single window overlooking the overgrown backyard. My parents initially intended it to be a guest room. They bought a nice single bed, a small knitstand, and a lamp. It looked cozy, welcoming even. But no guest ever stayed in it for more than a night. My aunt was the first. She came to visit for a week. The first night she slept in the guest room. The next morning, she came down for breakfast looking pale and tired. She insisted on sleeping on the couch for the rest of her stay, saying she just couldn't get comfortable, that the room felt crowded. We thought it was odd, but my aunt could be dramatic, so we didn't press her. A few months later, a friend of my dad's stayed over after a late poker game. The next day, he made some excuse about an early meeting and left before sunrise. He later told my dad he'd spent the whole night feeling like someone was standing in the corner of the room, just watching him. He said he never actually saw anyone, but the feeling was so intense he couldn't sleep a wink. After that, my parents decided to turn it into a home office. They moved the bed out and brought in a desk, a chair, and some bookshelves. For a while it seemed fine. My dad would work in there for hours, but then things started happening. Papers would go missing, only to reappear in a completely different spot. The chair would be pulled out from the desk when he was sure he had pushed it in. He'd hear faint whispers, like a conversation happening just on the edge of hearing, but the moment he tried to focus on it, it would stop. One evening, he was working late to finish a project. He told us he felt a sudden, bone-chilling cold sweep through the room, even though the window was shut tight. He looked up and saw the doorknob slowly, silently turning. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The door creaked open just a few inches, revealing the dark hallway beyond. But there was no one there. He packed up his briefcase and never worked in that room again. So the office was dismantled. My mom had a new idea, a craft room. She was an avid quilter and dreamed of having a dedicated space for her sewing machine and fabrics. She filled the room with colorful textiles, spools of thread, and patterns. It looked cheerful, vibrant. But the feeling of being watched never left. She'd be in there, focused on her sewing, and suddenly get the urge to look over her shoulder. Sometimes she'd see a fleeting shadow move in her peripheral vision. Her scissors would vanish from her cutting table and show up on the floor across the room. One time, her sewing machine started running on its own, the needle punching up and down at full speed, even though it was unplugged. That was the last straw for her. The craft room was abandoned. By this point, my brother and I were old enough to understand that something was wrong with that room. We called it the empty room. My parents, frustrated and a little spooked, decided to just use it for storage. They piled boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, and forgotten toys in there. They figured if something wanted the room, it could have it. For a few years, things were quiet. We'd open the door once or twice a year to get the Christmas lights or pull out summer clothes. And it was just a dusty, cluttered storage room. The unsettling feeling was still there, but it was dormant, buried under all our stuff. Then came the year I was 16. My parents decided it was time for a massive clear-out. We spent a whole weekend sorting through everything. The empty room was last on the list. We opened the door and the sight was bizarre. The boxes weren't just piled up. They were arranged, neatly. The Christmas decorations were in one corner, the old toys in another, the clothes stacked by season along one wall. It was like a department store stockroom. We all just stood there, staring. None of us had done it. We hadn't been in that room for months. My dad, ever the rationalist, tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe the boxes had settled. Maybe we just remembered it being messier than it was. But we all knew something had organized our junk. Even weirder, some things were missing. An old rocking horse my grandfather had made, A box of my mom's college photo albums, a collection of my dad's favorite records. They were just gone. Not moved, but completely vanished from the room. That's when we all admitted it. The room didn't want to be a guest room or an office or a craft room. It didn't even want to be a storage closet. It seemed to have its own ideas about what belonged inside it. It would keep some things and get rid of others. It would tolerate being filled with our belongings for a while, but eventually it would push back. It would not stay empty, but it wouldn't stay cluttered either. It wanted to be curated. After the big clear out, my parents made a new rule. Nothing goes in the empty room. Absolutely nothing. They cleared out the last of the boxes, leaving it completely bare. And for the rest of the time we lived in that house, that's how it stayed. A completely barren room at the end of the hall. Sometimes late at night, if you walked past it, you could hear things. A faint sigh, the soft creak of floorboards as if someone was pacing, the barest whisper of a melody. We never opened the door again. We didn't need to. We knew someone or something was in there. It had finally gotten what it wanted, its own space. It was no longer the storage room or the guest room. It was just the room, and it was finally, peacefully occupied. We sold the house a few years later. We never told the new owners about the room. Part of me feels guilty about that. But another part of me thinks it's not our story to tell anymore. It belongs to the house. And it belongs to whatever is living in that small room at the end of the hall, the room that would not stay empty. Thanks so much for listening to my family's strange little story. If you've ever had a weird experience with a house that seemed to have a mind of its own, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.